seeing too much asparagus go to waste in your house? Listen to today's episode to get some tips and some inspiration to help you reduce asparagus waste so that you can enjoy every single bite.
You're listening to Eat, Shop, Waste Not. Let us teach you how to source the most delicious groceries without wasting food or a single penny. Here's your host, Eric Sanderson.
Before we begin today's episode, I want to take a moment to share about my favorite spice company, Burlap and Barrel Single Origin Spices. You'll truly eat like no one else when you use their spices in your cooking. My sister-in-law was visiting us back in October. We made this French onion butterbean soup, which was so delicious, so decadent. But when she got back home and tried to make that same soup herself, it wasn't quite as good. She couldn't put her finger on it at first. But then I hit her that we had used this dried thyme I got from Burl Up and Barrel that we had, but she didn't have. So it just shows how much flavor you can get from a truly good quality spice company. Right now, if you order from their website and use my promo code, Eat Like No One, you'll get a free Robusta black peppercorn grinder when you add it to your cart with any additional $15 purchase. Now let's roll with today's episode. Right now is one of my favorite times of year for vegetables. And the big reason for that is asparagus. So in the month of May, it is the best time of the entire year to be enjoying all those delicious stalks of asparagus. But we don't want any of it to go to waste. You want to be able to savor every single bite of asparagus here. So today I want to talk about some ways to help keep your asparagus from going to waste. And first off, I want to discuss using all of the asparagus. Typically, when we are cooking asparagus, we end up taking off the bottom parts of it. The reason being is that the bottom of the asparagus tends to be fibrous. So most people just take that and toss it into the garbage. However, you can utilize it still. So how do you go about utilizing those tough ends of the asparagus? Well, I like to use them to make soup with. I like to infuse that asparagus flavor into some homemade stock. What I like to do is save a bunch of the ends from when I've cooked several bunches of asparagus, put them in the freezer, and then when I have enough of them, I throw them into a stock pot with some water and extract all that delicious flavor. You also can mix in other types of vegetables. It's like we were getting to veggie stock. And once I make that stock, I then cook some potatoes in it to make like a potato soup. And then you could add in some spinach or kale, and make like a really delicious green soup. Add some great seasonings, maybe some cream in here, and you have at least used those bottom ends, even if you aren't actually going to physically eat them. Still, you're still kind of use them to add flavor, so those are not completely going to waste. So that's something I love to do with the bottom ends that I really don't find much other use for because they're just too tough to eat. Now, something else to keep in mind too when you are preparing your asparagus, a lot of people will say just to kind of snap it and naturally snap it off. I think it's better to just line up the asparagus on a cutting board and cut off the bottom 1-2 inches, depending on how long it was to begin with. Usually, 2 inches usually max is usually enough to kind of get that off. And then just cut that straight with a knife. I think you end up then keeping more of the good asparagus than if you just kind of just snap it. Another thing we need to consider is how you treat the asparagus when you bring it home from the grocery store. So in a lot of grocery stores, you're going to see the asparagus standing upright in a small bit of water. That's because asparagus is just like a flower is, so you want to treat it as such. So why not do the same thing at home? When you get your asparagus home, place in a container that has a couple inches of water in the bottom and then place that into your fridge. One of the other things that leads to asparagus waste is when it gets moldy or it gets kind of soggy on top. The tips are usually the thing that's going to go bad. That's the thing you're most concerned about. And those tips are the best part. When you roast those in the oven or the air fryer and they get crispy, oh my goodness, they are so good. So you definitely don't want to have your tips be ruined by improper storage. You want to make sure that when you're storing your asparagus, you don't have a tight plastic bag over top of the tips. Because what that's going to do is that's just going to keep moisture next to the tips of the asparagus. And that's more likely to cause them to get soggy and maybe eventually moldy as well. So make sure you're not storing your asparagus inside of a plastic bag you got from the produce department. Now, asparagus stored in the fridge is going to last for a week normally, week or two, probably in your fridge. You actually could probably get 2 weeks of it sometimes if you're storing it properly. It's a hardy one. It's more hardy than some of the other things you might buy, like your salad greens or even like green beans. I think it's hardier. It's not going to be as hardy as like carrots, which you last in the fridge for weeks on end. But it's a little more hardy. But you still want to eat it as soon as possible to get the best flavor and the most sweetness in it. That's why like fresh picked asparagus is absolutely the best because it hasn't had time to convert the sugars in the asparagus to starch. And that's what ends up happening. That's why the asparagus that you get locally is going to be better than what you get that's grown far away. Most of the year, if you didn't know this, our asparagus is actually coming from Peru. So not very close. If you're listening to the United States, that isn't very close. It takes some time then to package that up, get it shipped up here. And so that you're gonna lose time out here. So that's where the quality is not gonna be as good either. So keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is when you buy any fresh vegetable from the store, including asparagus, is to plan what you're going to do with it. You go in the grocery store and you see a great deal on asparagus that you say, oh, what a great deal. I'm going to buy that asparagus. But if you end up doing nothing with it, then you just ended up wasting your money and wasting that good deal. So as you're walking around the grocery store, as you're driving home from the grocery store, start thinking about what you want to do with that asparagus. If it's something you just kind of bought in a way it wasn't part of the meal plan you were doing. I love, roasting its grains, putting it in the air fryer. I do that more often now than the oven. That works out like super great, just really super easy. One of my all-time favorite things to do with asparagus, believe it or not, is make a pesto with it. I take the asparagus, I roast it, I then chop off the tips, put those aside, take the stalks, put them in a food processor, along with some oil, I usually use sunflower seeds because they're cheaper than pine nuts, some Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper. Then just blend it up in a food processor, just like you would if you're making a basil pesto. Then what I love to do is to cook up some Israeli couscous. So this is the larger type couscous. It looks like little small round balls of pasta. Or you could also do it with orzo. That would be fantastic as well. And just kind of mix it all together. I then stir in the tips, because again, I don't put those in with the pesto because the tips have that great texture. I don't want to just kind of waste them by putting them in the pesto. All blends up here, so I kind of stir them back in to give it a little more texture and to be able to enjoy those. It makes for a really great side dish to go with any meal, or you could add some chicken to it to get some protein in there and make it into a full main course. So I hope I have helped you today with a little knowledge and some inspiration to reduce the amount of asparagus you waste in your household.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To get the show notes from this episode, visit our blog at eatlikenoone.com and click on Podcast in the main menu. Or click the link provided on whatever platform you're listening on. Make sure to hit subscribe and join us next time for more Eat, Shop, Waste Not.